Welcome to this episode of 10 for 10. That's 10 tips for 10 minutes of your time. Today's tips are on instructional design. When I hear a tip, I'll throw up a BAM, and you'll see this on your screen right now. That BAM means I heard it. You can see if you heard that tip too from our guests. And today we're glad to have Jenise Cook as our guest. She is an avid instructional designer and also a sole proprietor of ridgeviewmedia.com. So be sure to check out that site. How are you, Jenise?
I'm doing great, Terrence. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So since we only have 10 minutes, let's jump into our first question here. How have you seen instructional design change over the years?
That's a really good question. I've been involved in instructional design for over 15 years, and yet I'm not really sure I can quite answer that question because I haven't had the time to sit and really think about the changes because of all the projects I've been on. And with technology, there have been so many changes occurring because of technology that we use in instructional design that I tend to spend more of my time not thinking about how instructional design is changing, but how can we best leverage the new technology tools for our learners. So that's a good question. I think this weekend I'm going to sit and think about
it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the technologies. And there's so much information out there about social media, and there's so many great tools on social media. So of those tools, which ones have you found work for you, both from in your design process, but also in regards to, maybe even your post-productive work with instructional design?
I have found social media, especially in the last 12 months, to now be a key part of my instructional design process. And the reason being, for the past over 2 years, I'm now a virtual consultant or a telecommuter. You're seeing my home office. I work from home. I do still touch base with other instructional designers or learning and performance improvement professionals where I live. We have face-to-face meetings. But because of the internet and because of social media, a whole new world of colleagues has opened up to me, whether it's using Twitter, LinkedIn, still reading blogs. Some people say, well, because of Twitter, there's not as much activity on blogs or communication and sharing on blogs. But I find that there is. I've been extremely pleased with how social media has been increasing my network of colleagues in my profession. And if I have a question about if a particular approach, whether it's an instructor-led design or a design for e-learning, if I want to get some feedback because I am in my home office, I can use social media to reach out to my colleagues and say, what do you think about this? I have this approach for the learner, and bounce it off them, because I no longer have the cubicle or the office of colleagues around me, and we communicate through Twitter. We refer each other to blogs. Many of us are on Skype, like you and I are, and we just call each other up or send each other chat messages. I could go on and on about this topic. I really have been pleased to find through social media colleagues in our profession who genuinely care and want to collaborate. They help, they share their ideas and their resources. It's been mind-blowing.
How has that helped you with your profession?
Well, I've especially learned a lot via Twitter through the Learn Chat drinking game, actually. You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Somebody will throw out an esoteric instructional design term on Twitter, and of course, Jane Bozar, she's adorable, she's so collaborative, and she's such a great resource, but she'll go drink, on Twitter, which is a good way to kind of keep us grounded in what's most important in instructional design. But Learn Chat, which is on Thursdays, actually has 2 sessions on Twitter. The morning one, which is the one I can most participate on, because the afternoon Learn Chat tends to be facilitated by people either on the East Coast or Midwest, and that hits dinner time for you and me here on the West Coast. So the morning Learn Chat, I find myself collaborating and sharing with my colleagues in instructional design in the UK, Australia, Europe, Southeast Asia, and of course, some Americans who are awake at that time. And we ask a lot of questions. I think it's good to have a forum where we ask questions and maybe don't come up with practical, actionable solutions, which may also segue back to your question number one: how's instructional design changing over the years? Because I think all of us are still getting our arms around that, because the world is moving so rapidly. But again, you have to have fast fingers, sure. I think, in terms of Twitter, to keep up with the chat. Because Learn Chat, you have some very bright minds participating, and you've seen it, Terrence. Boy, trying to keep up with it live sometimes is a challenge, but it's fun.
Now, in your opinion, what do you find, or your experience, what do you find as the most, or at least one of the most challenging aspects of instructional design? If you follow the ADDIE model, I guess you have those 5 steps. And I know there's derivatives of the ADDIE model and quite the controversy out there on the ADDIE model. But of all the steps that you have to go through with ADDIE or with instructional design, what do you find is one of the most challenging ones, or one that's close to your heart?
Right now I'm anticipating that people in the room at DevLearn, there's probably some people who the hairs on the back of their necks are just bristling when they hear the word ADDIE. And I know that you and I are both members not only of the e-learning guild, but of ASTD. So we do talk about ADDIE quite a bit. And on Twitter, there is a wonderful Twitter tweet called ADDIE ID, who has other opinions. I do still follow ADDIE in a certain way, but very loosely. It depends on, especially the e-learning project I'm working on. Analysis tends to be the most challenging with the subject matter experts and other stakeholders on the project.
So
I've used gap analysis. It's going to sound so elementary. Gap analysis is when you're talking about the KSAs, knowledge, skills, attitude. I have found that doing something as simple as a gap analysis, usually not for a real complex curriculum, but perhaps for a series of learning activities that are not quite as enterprise-wide, new hire orientation, for example, certain compliance courses, sales or product training, you can use gap analysis to corral in the analysis and scope creep, or even the analysis paralysis that can happen. And in gap analysis, that's where we want to talk about, if you imagine 3 columns, let's say an Excel spreadsheet, and the left-hand column is based on knowledge, then skills, then attitude. You write down, where are your learners today in those 3 areas: knowledge, skills, and attitude. The far right column, you write down where, let's say for a corporation, based on the business goals of the company, where do you need the learners to be after they've completed the learning activity, again in knowledge, skills, and attitude. Our friends in academia, and I have taught community college before, I don't want to leave academia out, they can use gap analysis for their students, either in 2 years, 4-year colleges, or K through 12. But that middle column, then, you fill in those gaps. How can you resolve the gaps of where the learners are today and where you want them to be tomorrow, so to speak, really 6 months, a year after the learning activity, because it's all about workplace performance, and gap analysis can focus in on the learning objectives and activities that will resolve that gap between today and the future. Boy, I said a lot. Did you get all that? Did it make sense?
It absolutely did. Absolutely made a lot of sense. Since we're running up on our 10-minute time limit here, What would you give as advice for instructional designers when they're approaching either the gap analysis or any step in the design model for that matter? What's maybe 2 or 3 tips that you think are really important for an instructional designer to use?
An instructional designer should also be a junior project manager, and I've learned this through a series of hard knocks in the real world. Project Management Institute, PMI, has something called PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, and I believe if you go to www.pmi.org, if a person hasn't been there, they can learn about the Project Management Institute, because for any instructional designer, whether they're fresh out of college, getting started in their wonderful new profession, or a consultant or academician who's been involved many years, the most important thing is in the analysis phase, and even as you start design, make sure all stakeholders have reviewed the design and have signed off on it. And that means being a project manager. Even if someone who is a pretty high-level stakeholder says, oh, we don't need Mr. So-and-so to sign off, or Mrs. So-and-so, that is something that I have learned. You have your list of stakeholders on a project. You're the instructional designer, but it's also very important to be the project manager and get buy-in from all stakeholders, because that happened to me once.
Just one.
Thankfully, it was just one project, because it was so significant, the impact, that I make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody again, because it affected a lot of people, not just me. Is that we were ready to deploy the course, and the primary SME and stakeholder I was working with kept on saying, oh, no, we don't have to have so-and-so look at it because so-and-so's too busy. It'll be fine. We had to make significant changes after so-and-so saw it, and in order to get that sign-off, had to go back to design and development, and that was only just a couple weeks prior to deployment. We had everybody else's signature.
Ouch.
Yes. So although there's a lot of great books out there on instructional design methodologies for adult learners, I strongly recommend that all instructional designers, if they haven't already, take a look at pmi.org. If you don't have the money to get the certification as a project manager, it is time consuming and expensive, but you can just read up on it and become the best project manager you can become. It'll make your life easier.
Well, great. Well, we're unfortunately at the end of our 10-minute mark, so hopefully we can have you back to share some more of those tips. And talking with you, over the time that we've known each other, I know that we just scratched the surface of what you can contribute to to this broadcast, as well as to instructional designers out there. So we would love to have you back. I want to throw up your website real quick on the screen here. And that's it. So anybody looking at this that wants to know more about Jenise, it's ridgeviewmedia.com. So be sure to check out her blog. I go onto her blog quite frequently because she has some great tips. If you're into e-learning, it's a great place to pick up tips on using Articulate, and I believe some Captivate tips are on there as well. And also, she is an amazing voiceover talent if you ever have an opportunity to use her for her voiceover talent. Well, Jenise, thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to spend this 10 minutes. Actually, it was a little bit more than 10 minutes, but we'll say 10 minutes this time. Thanks so much. And everybody, this was 10 for 10. And I'm Terrence Wing, your host. That's it. It's that simple. Thanks for watching, everyone.